1999, which basically repealed the longstanding Glass-Steagall Act and allowed free affiliation among securities, insurance, and banking firms. This was considered to be a watershed event in U.S. regulation. However, like a Seinfeld episode, after that, nothing happened. For 9 years, everybody, including banking lawyers and investment bankers, and perhaps regulators, were waiting for this massive orgy of merger and acquisition activity on a cross-industry basis, and it didn't happen. Which brings us to 2008, a year in financial services that most people will have a hard time forgetting. It was one of the most interesting years ever. With the collapse of the U.S. subprime bubble in 2008, literally the biggest shakeup on Wall Street since the Great Depression, a wave of mergers, shotgun marriages, and government bailouts involving the largest financial institutions, not only in the U.S. but in the world. And just to quickly reorient you, 2008, January 11th, Countrywide Financial, one of the biggest lending banks in the country, merges with B of A. March 6th, keep your eye on the 5 largest investment bankers in the U.S. Bear Stearns, having financial problems, merges into J.P. Morgan. June 8th, Golden West Financial Corporation, second largest thrift in the country, merges into Wachovia Bank Shares. Then the dog days of September. September 7th, as the financial crisis worsens, the 2 world's largest mortgage GSEs, Fannie and Freddie, are placed into government receivership with about $150 billion of government funds injected. September 14th, Merrill Lynch merges with Bank of America. September 15th, Lehman Brothers, one of the 5 largest investment bankers, goes into bankruptcy. September 16th, AIG, one of the world's largest insurance companies, betting on the wrong side of credit default swaps, receives an $85 billion capital infusion package from the Federal Reserve Board. September 21st, Sunday evening, shockwaves once again went through the financial services world when 2 of the largest investment bankers in the United States, Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley, announced that they were going to become bank holding companies for the first time regulated by the Fed. September 25th, Washington Mutual, the largest thrift institution in the country, fails and is acquired by J.P. Morgan. September 26th, the FDIC declares Wachovia Bank a systemically important institution, and then there was a little confusion about who was going to acquire them. Apparently, Citicorp was going to acquire them with some government assistance, but lo and behold, on October 3rd, Wachovia is purchased by Wells Fargo. Later in October, the TARP legislation was passed, and over $700 billion in TARP funds were released, $125 billion of it going to the largest banks in the U.S. When the dust settled, and if you want to know what keeps regulators like Rick Osterman awake at night sometimes, you have the 8 biggest bank holding companies in the U.S. holding almost $11 trillion of assets, almost 60% of all U.S. banking assets. And you know, suffice to say, if you saw the movie Too Big to Fail, there were even more mergers planned than expected, and the government was trying to facilitate. That didn't happen. So no wonder that at that point there began to be a public outcry over government bailouts, lax regulation, and the notion that banks are too big to fail. Leading up to our panel discussion, the Dodd-Frank Act, seminal reform legislation it was, established Title I of the Act, requiring all bank holding companies with assets over